Hey folks, hopefully your meetings are going well. It's been a great meeting, conference so far, and I've seen a lot of interaction. Sat at lunch with a group and encourage them to mix not only with themselves who they know, but with everyone else. And I say the same thing to everyone. If you're only with the people you know you came with, then you're missing kind of an opportunity to spread your wings a bit. So if you can do that, that would be great. So here's the plan. We'll see how it works. It's sort of a semi-wrap-up, I guess, before the next one-on-one sessions. So first of all, let me introduce my co-chair, Allison Diana. She's a new member of the Tabor team. She leads Enterprise Tech, our publication, online publication that focuses just in this space. She's fantastic. So we're thrilled to have Allison as a colleague leading this effort. So she's going to be up here with me. Sure, why not? I think she's been on the team for just 1 month, so really she's pretty good, jumping right in. So here's the idea. The idea is that we're going to each go through a few observations over the past day and a half, whatever it is, I guess full day, so if you're just starting last night and through today, and then ask a few questions that we think are pertinent. And then we're going to open it up to audience participation. And it's not so much meant to ask us, because frankly we're not the experts, but we would like questions to get surfaced and for the audience to participate in answering them. And I think that's how we'll do it, Allison. So I'm going to go first, and these are in no particular order. So let's see here. So first thing, it was disappointing not to have Seagate present yesterday, and hopefully we can squeeze them in. They have an opportunity. It's too bad they have some illness and some shake-up there. So hopefully they'll be back. So I just wanted to mention that. Drilling info, Mike Kuvion, I don't know if Mike is here or not. Fascinating story. I had no idea 29,000 companies were around recording all this data for leases, et cetera, in the USA. Had some interesting things to say. Obviously a big data analytics solution, hybrid system. I liked mostly that he said, you have to be willing to fail. And his number was, if you fail 4 out of 10 times, that's okay. That's a hard thing for most people to actually do. I know it is for me. So that was kind of interesting. He said working in small teams was working for him, which I thought was interesting. And he said, produce something in 2 weeks. That sounds like what my boss says to me. So I don't know if Tom is here or not, but I'm listening. So that was a fascinating, discussion on a particular application. PayPal, of course, tremendous today. Arno and Ryan always do a great job, and I won't even try to recapture all they said. It was just too much, but there are a few things. One, again, another true hybrid approach. You mentioned that the tech expertise gap was something they had to deal with. He said, you have to remember that in enterprise applications, very often, at least in his enterprise application, I think this was Ryan, that reliability is first and performance is second, and that's how they look at their systems. I liked the point of the spear syndrome. It's both good and bad. When you're at the point of the spear and you're a pioneer, you take all the bruises. On the other hand, if you've got the right spear, you move forward. And he was saying that was worth it. So challenges were the expertise gap. Note the reliability first, performance second, leverage the new resources across the entire organization. And they said the gain, both of them, was you really would get revolutionary technology. And Ryan sort of emphasized that. Said, look, it sounds trite, it sounds like what you always hear, but the truth is they can do things now they could not do. So it's not just doing things faster, but they're doing things that they were not able to do. Okay. Wally Rector from DDN talked a little bit about DDN, well known to all of us. Certainly its dominance in the top 500 and in the top 100, very clear. And I liked what she said, adopting advanced technology, not just enterprise technology, is a challenge throughout most enterprises, and it's an opportunity to make or ask your HPC supplier to work with you. And she said that DDN certainly is willing to do that. She called them science projects, but I'm sure she means, frankly, anything. It's not to trivialize it. It's things that can work and help you become more competitive. They're willing to assist. So I think that if anybody does business with TDN here, you should definitely say, well, can you help us do this? And if you don't, you should go over and say, will you help us do this? But I think it's a general good rule that among HPC technology suppliers, there is a hunger to better penetrate the enterprise space, and that means providing assistance. Take advantage of it. Okay. The panel was, I love the panel. I wish I could claim credit for selecting all the panelists. My colleague Isaac Lopez did that, but variety of opinions there. Interesting similarities. One, that science or a specific problem drove most of the adoption of HPCs, at least among the panelists. Maybe the bio team was a little bit of an outlier. I mean, their job is to go in and solve things. Their client base is kind of scientists hungry for HPC solutions. So a bit of an outlier, but the others really had specific problems, and the reason was that it provided a very clear competitive advantage. I think the the Gulfstream comment about it's how they succeed. It's their ROI is clearly measured by the position of their aircraft, and they have advantages that they couldn't have otherwise. They could not do the kind of prototyping, modeling of airframes, things like that without these kinds of technologies. So that's why to do it. Fascinating with how people actually adopt it. So I had never heard the stealth mode expressed quite as it was today from the Gulfstream guys, two separate organizations grabbing the budget from engineering, but that wasn't always the case. The folks in the automotive world had a more orderly approach, and Mercury seemed like they had identified a problem, but also a more orderly approach. So it doesn't seem like it's clear that there is a single adoption approach, other than a clear problem is needed to highlight it. What else did they say? Budgets definitely get stretched, so that's something worth knowing. So, and also the time to ROI is a bit longer than usual. Again, these are in no particular order, and I don't have too many more. Really, I'll just finish with a couple of questions, and then give Allison a chance to share her observations. But one of the things I didn't get to ask the panel, which I would like folks here perhaps to answer, is what is the biggest challenge? What was the biggest challenge they faced? And so I'm hoping that some of the questions we're suggesting here will get resurfaced among you, and we'll get discussion going. So that's one. I'm curious about working with high-performance computing centers that exist now. I know MERLS at NCSA has that private sector partner program to transfer technology. Others also have that. In Europe, it's a very common approach. I think industry and the national labs work even maybe a little closer there. But so there are these concerted efforts to take technology in existing, traditional supercomputing environments and transfer it out. Does anyone here do that? How can we do that best? And I guess that's really it for the moment. I'm going to turn it over to Allison.
Thank you, John, and thanks, everybody. As John said, I've been with Enterprise Tech for about a month, so this is a terrific experience, just meeting everybody and just really diving into HPC. A little bit of background: I've been covering enterprise technologies from the traditional enterprise tech side for a long time, and before that I covered the indirect channel for about 10 years. So it's really exciting to learn about a whole new world of technology. One of the things that really struck me most, John did such a great job of going through each individual presentation, I'll just kind of give my big picture, was something that I've heard a lot from other IT executives and professionals, no matter what the technology is, and that was how so many presentations underscored the need for a champion, picking the right pilot projects, and then touting your success internally. And it was fascinating to hear that with HPC as well as with cloud or mobile, whatever the technology you need. It sounds as though that's the similar template for success here. And Mike's drilling info presentation showed too that we can't necessarily be satisfied that we've just checked off all these check boxes. Okay, we've done cloud, we've done SaaS, we've done this. That isn't always necessarily what's right for the organization. In his case, obviously, they needed to go a lot further to really reinvent their whole organization for profit, for increased profitability. There weren't 3 steps, there were maybe 15. So I thought that was interesting to show that kind of transformation. Merely using a new technology to repeat the same old steps that you were doing isn't going to change the outcome any. You've just got a new technology and the same results. And something that really struck me is, and this was a big shock to me with my background at Information Week, was where are the CIOs? Where are the CTOs? They're not here. So that was really amazing. And I was speaking to Molly before, and we were thinking that probably they'll find out about you guys at some point. And it reminded me a little bit about when cloud started out, and you'd see the business users bringing in cloud because IT wouldn't listen to them, and so they obviously on a much smaller price tag. But and I'm wondering if at some point that's what's going to happen with HPC. Either the business needs will be such that CIOs are going to have to get involved because they'll discover that that they need to sign off on bigger POs, or if something's going to change so that CIOs, CTOs, and the IT departments are going to get called in for integration after the fact, and wondering how that's going to change the relationship between vendors and enterprises, between IT and enterprises, systems integrators and solution providers and enterprises, and really how that's being developed now. That's something that I find particularly of interest, and I agree. I have a bias there with having written about enterprise IT departments and CIOs for a long time. So those are some of the questions that I had. Was really just how does the HPC community advocate IT or work with IT about the business solutions, especially outside the traditional areas that we've heard a lot about, scientific and R&D and things like that, because there's, there are just so many potential and real existing solutions out there. Also, with so many IT professionals having their own careers change these days because of cloud, because of outsourcing, because of this push to make IT into a profit center, not a dollar suck. How can those skilled IT professionals become assets to the HPC community? What can they learn? What do they need to know to become skilled, at least in part of the HPC world? And also, what beyond performance, and Molly touched on this, does HPC bring when it's speaking to enterprises, especially looking beyond, the traditional, the pharma and things like that, those communities? And another question I had was, where are most enterprises at in terms of needing HPC? Would they be ready for a conversation about HPC outside of engineering and R&D, or is it premature for that? So I thank you all very much for a tremendous learning experience, and I look forward to a lot more conversations now and throughout the rest of Wednesday.
Good job. So let me just seed the questioning with this question I have about transferring technology from the big supercomputing centers. Has anyone been involved in that and had any experience with that, good or bad? I mean, there's lots of talk about they could be more effective. Has anyone done it? Anyone have an opinion on it? So it looks like it's virgin ground in spite of the fact that it's well, there are these programs where they can help, where you could work with, with the supercomputing center, either on training or capacity, so that you could take and use high-performance computing for your purposes. And over time, two things can happen. Obviously, they would love to use some of their capacity, helps them justify what they do, but also you get the skills then to apply it in your own area. And I know that in Europe, it's been done in several industries. The automotive industry is a big one. where a bunch of simulation has taken place. Everyone does safety crash simulation, things like that. But the idea is to get those high-performance computing cycles. They require shared memory and parallel program, things like that. And I wondered if, have we done it here at all? Yes.
Well, I work for Oak Ridge National Lab, and we have a program, and we're doing it every day.
Okay, so maybe you could give a couple of examples along that.
Sure, happy to. We've got a number of companies that work with us, and by the way, not just at Oak Ridge, the Department of Energy generally is opening up its supercomputer centers to make them available to companies as well as to universities and other lab researchers around the world. So I'm from Oak Ridge, but some of my colleagues are here. David Martin's here from Argonne, and Argonne does the same thing. And I don't know if David Skinner's here from NERSC. He was on, I saw his picture in the program, and even Lawrence Livermore now is setting up, has a supercomputer center outside of the classified area, and again, they operate under a little bit of a different model, but they make time available to companies too. And so we've had large and small companies who come to our center, and generally what we ask for is, do you have a problem that is a challenge problem for you that exceeds your internal capabilities, and you'd like to get a head start on that. You'd like to get, it's competitively important for you, and you need to get access to more capability, whether that's computing or expertise or a combination of both. And DOE will make time available for that through several different programs for companies to work on that. Also, we make time available and encourage the commercial software vendors who want to work on scaling up their software, testing it out in new environments, to come to the labs where they can get access to systems that exceed what they have internally, or maybe exceed what they're able to get through some of the vendor relationships that they have too. And we work closely with the vendors on that. And we also encourage the commercial software vendors, along with their customers, to come in partnership. Maybe solve a problem that's of importance to the customer, and at the same time work on the software and see how that can scale. I know for our organization, we've had, last year we had 38 industrial projects, and we gave out about 265 million hours of compute time to companies in a whole variety of areas. We had aerospace, insurance, consumer products, auto. We had small businesses, large companies. So it's still a boutique program. We're not talking thousands of industrial projects a year, but it's growing, and DOE is pretty supportive of it.
So the answer is it's ongoing.
Very supportive.
No, go right ahead.
I'm sorry?
I was going to say, so the answer is that it's ongoing, that it's robust where you are, and because I haven't heard of it I've heard of the programs, but not of the successes, not of the individual companies. So I don't know the insurance company. I don't know, and I think that some of those things would be helpful, certainly for us in the media, to reflect back to the audience, but just generally, so we know,
Absolutely, we'd be happy to, and I'm sure my colleagues at Argonne and Livermore and Lawrence Berkeley would be too. Part of the challenge is us getting the word out, so we're really delighted that you guys included us today so that we can have a chance to let people know. Thank you.
What about the question? Okay, question
I was
back.
just going to add, John. Susie gave the DOE perspective on this, and so I'm Dan Stanzione from the Texas Advanced Computing Center. So from the NSF perspective, there are similar programs. I think we have representatives of 4 of the 5 big NSF centers here: Jim Kasdorf from Pittsburgh and Merle from NCSA. And I think there's more. And we have a similar program, and in my experience, it's not strictly about being able to run production jobs on the systems. Well, for specific examples, in the last 4 hours, we've done allocations for Shell and Syngenta today, new requests for time on the systems. But I think a lot of the value of those programs, and we're at a smaller scale than the DOE is in terms of the hours we give out, but with small companies, it's about access to the capacity, right? We do spacecraft design, finite element for Firefly, right? They're small, they don't have an in-house IT budget. But with Exxon and Chevron and BP, it turns out they actually have a slightly larger budget than we do, by 40 or $50 billion. And so they have the in-house budget to spend, and they're not coming to us from capacity. They're coming to us for sort of canary in the coal mine type experiences with new technologies. And so they do run some on our systems, mostly honestly on fake data. For some reason, Exxon doesn't want to put reservoir data on a system that we give accounts to Shell to, but never figured that out. But what they'd like to know is, well, you know, we had Xeon Phi a couple of years before they did. How does that actually work? How do you run your queues? How do you manage shared jobs? How do you manage shared file system? So it's really more of a tech transfer experience around just learning what they're going to be doing in a year or two. That is really the core of our industrial program as much as it is access to the systems, I think.
I would mention one other thing that I think that NSF centers do and the DOE centers do also, and that's a lot of training.
Yeah.
So, and that's no cost, I mean, except for you have to just get yourself there. But these are generally, the training programs are generally open to the community, and maybe we can do a better job on getting the word out, but they're certainly advertised to the users, and it's all open on the websites. And Dan and Merle, I think you guys do run training on a whole variety of things throughout the year too. So when we talk, I know I saw on the end, the agenda here at one point, the challenge of talent development. And that's certainly, I think, at our center is a big concern, which is why we do this training and want to make it as widely available. We're all in it together.
Interesting you should bring up the challenge for talent. At Leverage Big Data, which I think it's a month or so ago, but anyway, there was someone talking about how, again, the shortage of data scientists, and one of the things they had done is they started recruiting physicists from places like Fairmade, which are shutting down or at least limiting some of their activities. So not only can you get trained at these centers, but they're actually, you have to look outside the normal channels to find these people, I think, as well.
Yeah. I know some people are using liberal arts majors. They're training them as data scientists.
I was very tempted to read your bio when I saw all of that. Another thing that came up actually on this panel that we had, IT took it kind of in the chin, and I think that wasn't quite fair. We probably should get the IT version of that if there are any folks from more traditional IT organizations in the audience. And even in general, I think next time we'll bring in some IT folks on the panel so the discussion's a little more balanced. Yes.
So I think IT deserves to take it on the chin. I'm from the IT organization. At AIG, they've modeled this. They've created a little bit different model in terms of there are specific groups that are still within IT, but they're IT, that service very narrow business units. So for instance, if it's a sales and marketing organization, there's a business IT that supports them. The group that I'm in supports the actuarial science, the investment, treasury, SAP accounting, and that kind of stuff. Those needs are completely different. And then they have another one that supports all the commercial applications. And then we have our global services, and that's a service organization. But we're trained to give the business what they want, so we go out and find that. And then, if we have the sponsorship from the business, and we get the sponsorship from our IT leaders, which is pretty easy to do, that just goes into the corporate fabric. And yes, there's a project governance board that's made up of business people and IT people, but they approve it. But it wasn't always that way. This is a change that really has only happened over the last year and a half. So, I mean, a lot of these IT departments, they need to get with the program. And frankly, not to mention a company that has an engineering component that's doing their HPC, that CIO, CTO needs to get with the program. I can't believe that he's sat there that long and allowed that to just go on without addressing it and putting his arms around these guys and giving them the help and support that they need. I don't get that. And so we've got a very progressive new CIO and CTO, and they're doing that. And that's where traditional IT needs to kind of start to step up and realize that there's change coming. So.
And the good CIOs are doing that, what you're talking about.
Sure.
So actually, I'd like to add a little bit with the commercial offering from the national labs or NCSA or national labs. So we did some evaluation in the past couple of years to see that if we can get something from the national lab, NCSA, Ohio Supercomputing, or Oak Ridge now you have mentioned. So pricing still seems like a little bit higher than we can get some system in-house. So can we do something on that side so that we can, the price is attractive and people can go there?
Absolutely. Good question.
Yes, talking to some of my colleagues too, because we all have a little bit of a different model.
Good question.
It's an excellent, excellent question. I'm really glad you asked it. The DOE supercomputer centers operate on a little bit of a different model. They're not a revenue generating model. So our supercomputer centers are considered a user facility. And DOE has a number of these user facilities. And what does that mean? Well, it's kind of a term of art, but it's really important to understand. What the government says is, look, we understand there are these very large, expensive instruments, supercomputers, electron beam microscopes, spallation neutron source, and no university, no company can afford to buy them. The risk is just too high. So the government says, okay, we'll buy the instrument, we'll build a building and put it in the building, and we'll staff it with really smart people, and then we're going to make it available to researchers around the world, generally through some kind of a peer review proposal process, so that we know we're getting interesting, high-impact science and engineering and mathematic problems. Now, in return, the government says, we'd like you to share your new knowledge, your new intellectual property, because the goal of these centers is to lift the knowledge base of the science and engineering community. And so by and large, most of the projects that operate, at least at our center, operate in such a way that they can share and publish through a peer-reviewed publication or a presentation at a peer-reviewed conference. They can share new information and new knowledge. And if they can do that, let's say the output of the project is a blend of both proprietary and non-proprietary information, as long as they can agree up front with us that they can share that new intellectual property, they can keep the proprietary portion confidential. So as an example, let's say a company is designing a product. You can keep the geometries, the proprietary geometries of the product to yourself, but you might have learned a lot of new science when you're doing materials analysis or science. So the model is the payment is the new intellectual property, the new information to share. Now, if a company comes in and says, gosh, this project is so super sensitive from a competitiveness point of view, we can't share anything. The government says, that's okay, but you have to reimburse the taxpayer a little differently. And in that case, you have to pay a cost recovery fee. And so every lab figures out what their cost recovery fee is every year based on a DOE accounting formula. We crank out the numbers, they check the math, and that's what the cost recovery fee is. And then you just have to check with the center to find out what their cost recovery fee is for that year.
Yeah, so I'm David Martin from Argonne National Lab. So I agree with everything that Susie said. To kind of build on that, what the labs are really looking for is collaboration. And so it's not necessarily computing time that people come for. There's a lot of expertise across the National Lab complex around computational science and verification and validation and all. And that really is kind of the sweet spot. So people sometimes come and just want time. And that's when they hear the pricing model. But really what we're looking for is collaboration. And once the collaboration starts, there is no charge for that. It's all done on a sharing basis where publications are done jointly, research is done jointly, and then the outcome is shared. And even though there may be proprietary software or proprietary geometries, the real goal is to share scientific knowledge.
Yes. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I might add one other thing. Because we have just a wonderful audience here today and a lot of vendors, and I just want to make sure that the vendors here recognize we're not here to compete with the vendors. It's not our role or our desire to somehow siphon away industrial work here so that companies aren't going to buy supercomputers at all. We're not set up for production runs. If you need an answer every Monday morning, we are not the place to come to do that. What we have found is that when companies bring their challenge problems to us, in effect, that seeds the market because they take that risky problem, bring it to a lab, collaborate, solve it, and then they go back and make a big upgrade at their own center. And we've seen that happen again and again with companies who've come to see us. So I guess I just wanted to reassure all of the terrific vendors here that from DOE's perspective, we hope that by doing this, we're actually seeding the market and strengthening the infrastructure.
Well, you know, the technology transfer programs with both the NSF centers and the three-letter agencies have been around since the beginning of HPC. You know, this dates back to '86 when they launched the first NSF program with the 5 principal centers. NCSA was very, very successful with that, and some of the early adopters were GE and General Motors and Caterpillar and this camera company you may have all heard of called Kodak. And you know, and it was very successful for them. It was successful for both, and it's a great opportunity for proof of concept for multiple reasons. You know, at the very best, to understand the capabilities, the capacity, and so on of the technology. We've been following it for years. You know, I mean, it's a very exciting part of what the labs and the NSF centers and the state centers like TAC provide. You know, and stimulates the economy, just on and on. You know, and it's done globally. You know, so if you go to Jülich in Germany, if you go to, you know, the whole PRACE program in Europe is focused almost exclusively on that. You know, and certainly the smaller the country and the less resources they have to spread around, you know, the more you'll find these tighter collaborations between the centers and industry. I wanted to just make a comment about something a little bit off that track. There was an interesting thread that we were somewhat following, and Allison brought it up, and this is that thread about having 2 distinct budgets, you know, within an organization. One where you've got an HPC budget, you know, doing all this critical stuff to improve product, you know, reliability, credibility, whatever, and then the enterprise budget. And that dynamic of, you know, how that transforms and transpires and initiates. So from a stealth mode type of, you know, incident where you get a little bit of money, you build it, and the proof of its capability is you know, recognized, and all of a sudden that budget grows. And now you end up with these 2 distinct budgets, and I think this is what you were referring to, Allison, where, you know, at some point it's going to gain some recognition from somebody with a CXO title because of the, you know, you've got 2 IT budgets, and the, you know, the thing Ryan was saying was that the larger budget will more than likely trump the smaller budget. And so, you know, does that put the HPC budget at risk? Because it's always going to be a little bit smaller than the IT budget. And so, you know, I'm interested in what are your experiences like? What are the dynamics in, and has anyone faced that? You know, where the HPC budget and the enterprise budget begins to collide, and what are have you run into that yet?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to answer you with raised eyebrows. I guess that didn't work. So, yeah, you know, for us, we tried the sort of stealth mode. In fact, we didn't try. We were successful as a stealth mode, sort of off on the side. Just convince a few people, hey, we're going to spend some money. Just trust us. But one, that actually did rely on trust, which I don't think is a good way to run the company. In other words, you know, we had a good track record internally, and we were able to make the case literally based on trust to say, hey, we want to spend some money, give us a shot. But more importantly, as time goes on, I'll be honest, the HPC systems have become something of an anchor to us. In other words, we are always tied to the stealth effort now. And we can't always get away from it. So as we are trying to do new things and move forward, traditional IT stuff that I wish we could outsource back to our own people, we still can't do yet. You know, so you know, I would really like it if they would you know, give me some SAs so that I can be like, you guys, like, there's 8 nodes broken, go fix that, right? But right now that's still shoulders to me, literally to me, and I don't mind doing that work, but at the same time, I'm a very highly paid SA, right? And I shouldn't have to be doing that.
So if it had gone through IT initially, you'd have been able to push that back on them?
Well, if we tried going through IT initially.
That's right, you did.
And there's such a sea change in their way of thinking. The way IT tends to save money is by compartmentalizing functions and then developing talent and resources as centers of excellence for those different functions. It makes great business sense, right? Your network guys are responsible for your network. They know who to hire. They get the right guys in. You optimize that kind of stuff out. They're the ones with the vendor relationships there and so on. And then you repeat that for storage and compute and all these other types of things. The trouble with buying a shared resource that's tuned differently, that's tuned for performance of the resource as opposed to optimization of the individual compartment that you operate in, is that the other groups have to start, again, trusting each other back and forth,
Right.
Right now, inside PayPal, you're talking to the guy who knows InfiniBand, period, right? And networking is not my background, but I know far more about InfiniBand and how to use it than our guys on the Ethernet side. Luckily, again, for us, trust worked out, but I don't recommend that going forward. So I think that you've got to have a good conversation. I think they're right. It has to be at the CXO level that says, hey, these new technologies are out there. They force your hand to cause these different compartments to work together and to move forward talking that way. But I did have one comment from earlier, and that is, with regards to stuff like Information Week, which we also consider to be, sort of a tier 1 market for this, and they do get the CIOs and CTOs, why aren't the media forcing the conversation already? In other words, they've got those guys in the room. Ask them where their HPC guys are, because we know they're out there. I don't know why they don't force that conversation.
At Information Week specifically?
Well, all of those different outlets, right? We just last week, had a long conversation with the Mercury News over the same type of stuff around supercomputing and things like that, and it almost came as a shock to our CTO, who we had to, bang on the head and be like, "We told you about this. Remember, it's this thing," that kind of thing, right? But the media can help this problem, right, by forcing it to be something that people are talking about louder.
It can, and I'm not sure why Information Week doesn't cover it.
Without wishing to subvert the overt purpose of this conference, perhaps I'd suggest that the role of IT and HPC should be separate in every company, and that if you hire a CIO to manage your finances, they report to finance. If you manage a CTO to support your engineering, they report to engineering. Now, if you want to merge the roles, you hire a COO to run the help desk. And the help desk works with both those people, and your higher-ups have a view now that's not just one voice, but 3 voices. Of course, it's 3 or 4 times more expensive, but in the long run, it seems to me that we can share between IT and HPC techniques. We can show a company that there are HPC techniques that will work for financial data. We can show that there are IT techniques that work for especially collaboration on the web. But why does one person have to sit over this who can't possibly understand all these worlds? So I know at the large research and engineering company that I retired from, which has a component of Department of Energy work, that group maintains its own computer support group, its own network, its own resources. The only thing they share is the financial system, which, by the way, doesn't work well for anybody at this company. But all the resources going into the finance system, as we heard from the drilling info person, are sapping the resources going into the very people that make the products the company depends on to succeed. And this is just stupid. It's just ridiculous. You put your resources into the revenue that comes back to the company, not to the people that manage it. I'm sorry. That's how my feeling. So thanks for letting me share.
Interesting point by Drill Info.
So sort of following up with that, our entire company, BioTeam, is made up of people who are have expertise in multiple disciplines, right? And so my contention at this point is that getting back to the training aspect of things, right? I think that as the lines of what needs to function at high performance, where the enterprise sits, what the goals of the companies are, what regulation is, that whole thing. As those lines start to cross a little bit, as information becomes key and the key driver in most of our environments, that it's time to train people not to sit in one silo or another. I think that it's time for people to really understand in sort of a cross-functional way, you got to understand a little bit of everything, otherwise you can't integrate it. Otherwise all you're doing is building silos, and silos are not functional in any sort of environment that I've ever been in. I spend most of my career assessing organizations, then telling them to tear down their silos, and here's ways to do it, right? Especially in resource organizations, it just stifles everything. And in a lot of the companies that I've worked in also, it's the same way. So that's my comment.
Looks like there's a hand back there.
This will have to be the last comment.
Or maybe not. Maybe just the glare. I wanted to ask Molly if she had any examples of working with a company to help them understand. I mean, I thought that was intriguing to say, you can ask leading vendors like DDM, which have been in the high-performance area for a long time, how best to use it. What's your advice on how to do that, how to approach someone, and do you have any examples that you might point to?
Sure. A good example probably is the PayPal case study. Since those guys are here, we worked with them years ago on a lot of what they were talking about on how they introduced HPC into their environment, and they've continued to evolve over time. We're up in the Bay Area, obviously not me, but some of my counterparts are up in the Bay Area today talking to one of the big web scale companies again about how can they take bits and pieces of our technology and integrate it into their cloud offerings to be able to offer a more responsive, future-looking type of service. So, those are the big guys, of course. But as you look at pretty much any meeting that we have at DDN, we'll typically have a technical architect with us. And the best meetings we have are the first ones we have with our customers, and we sit down and our users are saying, here's the problems we're trying to solve, instead of us going and saying, okay, well, here's our 17 products and how big and fast and what capabilities they have. If we can sit down and understand our users' problems they're trying to solve, that they're trying to accelerate from 30 hours to 10 hours for a time to results, or get 3 runs of a job in a business day for the researchers, then we can put together a solution and technology to help integrate that into the environment. Okay. So it really is, I find that with DDN technology, if we can understand what our users are trying to solve, typically for an average user, we have everything they need for an HPC environment. But for the corner case users, the ones that are in different markets, the really big ones, the really unique ones, sometimes it requires some field integration work. We do blueprints all the time where we pull in, a good example would be Red Bull Media, completely different market actually. There is one media customer here, but Red Bull Media is the company that does the extreme sports clips where people are jumping off of satellites into the universe and all kinds of crazy things going on. And they had the need to be able to edit those clips simultaneously and get them up into production in less than 24 hours. So think with your HPC brains on, well, that's multiple people accessing the same large file at the same time, parallel work. It sounds very HPC-ish, but they needed to be able to connect to Apple workstations over CIFS protocols that are extremely high performance. Okay, yeah, exactly. That's not just something you buy out of the box. And so it took DDN technology, doing some Samba, SMB3 work, some device driver work for the Apple side, and now they're doing Red Bull Media clips on HPC technology from DDN. So those are the things we do all day. That's what DDN excels at, and that's the kinds of things we love to do. So it's really just a matter of saying, hey, I have a problem, can you help me solve it? And if we can't, we'll say we can't. I mean, we're quite busy and we don't want to waste your time or our time, but if it's something we can solve, we like to roll our sleeves up and do it. And it would be hard for you to figure out just by reading our website on which pieces can solve which problems, because there is a lot of technology. So that's how I'd recommend it.
Any last questions before we adjourn? Well, a great morning, great early afternoon. I want to thank everyone for their attention. I hope that you're getting as much as you can out of the conference. Please mix. I think that's the biggest value you can have, is just to talk to people who you don't know and learn what they know and give a little bit about what you know back. And with that, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allison and John. Thank you.